Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ben Versus. This week it's Ben versus Grant, and that's Grant Chachere from River Sports Media. And if you missed it, we had our first topic about what is the greatest single season performance by a quarterback in college football history. If you missed that, make sure to go to our YouTube channel, and it's actually the previous video before this, so it's pretty easy to find. So we go to our second topic, and we're going to actually go into LSU. So this is going to be a pretty recent topic as far as LSU. As LSU fans notice, Brian Kelly had to overhaul a whole new defensive staff. Now, there's some pretty big names that are on the defensive coaching staff, but which one was the best for LSU? And both Ben and Grant will have a couple of minutes. First, they'll have at most 2 minutes, about a minute to two, to give their first initial argument. Then they'll have a counter argument and then a final argument. So we're going to go to Ben with this question first. So, Ben, which defensive coaching staff hire is the best for LSU?
I would have to say that's Corey Raymond, and it's pretty simple, and that goes back to what he did when they had the famous known as DBU. He was one of the better defensive back coaches we've seen really in college football. When you look of how many guys went to the National Football League that were a part of that LSU defense back in that time slate of when they had that known honey badgers and guys like that, that was as good as I've ever seen. You could ask some of the best offensive minds, and they kind of saw it firsthand when that defense did what they did. But I just think when it looks down to it, it's how many they produced to the NFL.
That's it. One of the architects of what LSU is now called DBU. Now Corey Raymond trying to bring that moniker back. So Ben went with Corey Raymond, but Grant's actually going to go with another defensive coach that's trying to stir up a position that was once really good at LSU.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Bo Davis, who is the defensive line coach at LSU. But he's going to primarily focus on the interior defensive line, with Kevin Peoples focus on the pass rushers like the edge rusher, D-ends, and the jack position. But Bo Davis is arguably the best defensive line coach right now in college football, and also is fairly respected in the NFL as well. He is the disciple of Pete Jenkins, who is arguably the greatest defensive line coach of all time, regardless of level. And not only that, he's a former All-SEC nose guard at LSU in the early 90s. And in the 12 years he has been a defensive line coach at the collegiate level, he has produced 17 all-conference selections, 7 All-Americans, players who have won the Island Trophy, the Defensive Player of the Year in both the Big 12 and the Conference USA, along with the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year. And at his most recent stop at Texas, where he was a huge part of Texas researchers and relevancy of college football, Devondre Sweat. I'll say this one last part. Devondre Sweat was a consensus All-American and a winner of the Island Trophy, and Byron Murphy was the Big 12 Defensive Line of the Year.
There we go. So two good choices right there. Two of the best of what they are at LSU, two of the best position coaches in the country. But Ben, we'll go back to you. Why isn't it Bo Davis?
It goes back to when you look what they did in the secondary in that span with all those players really like Patrick Peterson and the many others. I don't know if you've seen a productivity of defensive back like that. There's been some special moments, but it goes back to one thing. And I'm not saying it's all about going to the NFL, because they have guys that are all conference All-Americans and they might not play very long in the NFL or play in the NFL at all that are special for a team in college football. But I've not seen something like that on what they produce. So I just feel like he's really going to impact this defense for long term.
All right, so that was your counter argument. Now I'm going to reset the clock here, Grant. So now you have a minute. Why isn't it Corey Raymond?
Well, the reason why I'm going to say it's more Bo Davis than Corey Raymond is due to the fact that I think Corey Raymond would have came back to LSU if you literally gave him $1 and a half-shaven puppy, because he loves LSU, he's from New Iberia, and he's a great recruiter. So everyone knows him around Louisiana. But however, Bo Davis, it took a lot to get him, right? First it fizzled out because he wanted more than what LSU gave him, but then LSU finally got figured out. They figured out the money situation. So I think, it took a lot more to get Bo Davis than it did to get Corey Raymond, which makes him more significant. And then also with how LSU's struggling right now with defensive line depth, and also development too. It's very important that you bring back a guy like Bo Davis, who everywhere he's been a part of a top 10 defense, if not the number one defense in college football, whether it was at Alabama, Texas, or LSU, or even Texas San Antonio.
Yeah, both coaches have been really productive and have really been raved about by coaches across the country at their position as one of the best right now in the profession to do it. So finally, y'all get 2 minutes. So y'all get 2 minutes to finally persuade the audience, persuade the fans, and why they should vote for your coach. So I'm going to reset the clock here, Ben. You have 2 minutes to convince the fans why Corey Raymond is the best defensive hire for LSU.
I feel like, again, going back to, I think with fans who've got to remember, and they got to kind of go back in time and think of what those defenses were like that went head-to-head with some really good offenses in the SEC and what they did at the secondary. I have always been a fan of him. I really think, recruiting-wise, he's a very good recruiter, being a local guy like he is. But what they did is, like, to play, man coverage or anything like that, that's a hard thing to teach a defensive back. Now, if you want to really think about it in a football aspect, that's why he's that good, because it's hard to teach man coverage to his secondary and how that has to be, how that translates to you doing anything in secondary, from dropping the coverage to not dropping the coverage, playing man, playing off, whatever. What they did in the past was so consistent at the secondary, and he's going to have a lot of depth. They have a lot of depth that they're going to be bringing back. They've got some talent that can really develop into something, and I really feel like he has a chance to really impact this defense, because we saw some challenges last year, and they need that guy that can really impact the defense. And I really think with what the talent's been that they're building back on recruiting, they've had to, because they've lost a lot of players. They've lost a lot of scholarship players. That's going to be a vital asset to what he brings. And it goes back to, he's a great teacher of the game. He knows how to teach players consistency.
Well, we know what the biggest detriment to LSU was last year, and probably cost them a national championship, was the bunch of blown coverages and just big plays that defense giving up. So hopefully, with Corey Raymond coming back, that could help change that moniker back to DBU for LSU. But what's worrisome right now, Grant, is the defensive line, the interior defensive line. So you get 2 more minutes to persuade the fans why Bo Davis is the most important hire right now for LSU.
Oh, it's pretty simple. LSU so let's talk to some perspective. LSU was DBU before Corey Raymond got there. Corey Raymond solidified it, but LSU was known as DBU even going back to Ron Cooper, who was the one who really developed Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson, and also Mo Claiborne, who was actually the Jim Thorpe Award for that 2011 team, right? And Ron Brooks, people like that. But since 2009, let's go back the last 15 years. Since 2009, LSU has had 3 DB coaches: Cooper, Raymond, and of course Robert Steeples. LSU since 2016 has had 12 defensive line coaches, including Bo Davis. 2016 was Ed Orgeron, but then remember Les Miles got fired. They brought in Pete Jacobs. Pete Jacobs was the defensive line coach the following year. 2018 it was Dennis Johnson. 2019-2020 it was Bill Johnson. 2021 it was Andre Carter. 2022 it was Jamar Cain. 2023 Jamar Cain leaves for the Broncos. Sheridan was the interim defensive line coach. He leaves for Tulane. Then it was the guy's name who got the health issues?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it was the defensive line coach had health issues. Then they had to bring in John Jancic. John Jancic didn't really know what he was doing because he's not familiar with the defensive line. So they had to bring in Pete Jenkins again, and then finally, you had Bo Davis. But I think that's one thing. It's consistent at the defensive line. They need a structure at the defensive line, because I think the biggest issue with the defense last year was the defensive line. They brought no pressure, and also you need pressure to help out the DBs, especially when they're very young and inexperienced. But then also, LSU has not had a elite defensive line, especially on the interior, since 2012. Right, the big reason why LSU had the golden age in the 2000s, early 2010s, was because they had an elite defensive line, right, and that also helps out the DBs. So, even in 2019, that was a good defensive line, but that wasn't elite, and you need an elite defensive line to win national championships, evidenced by Alabama, Texas most recently, Michigan, Clemson, Georgia. What do they have? Elite interior defensive linemen.
And there you go, and time is up. And I think Jimmy Lindsey was the guy you're referring to.
Jimmy Lindsey, correct, yeah.
So good arguments for both these guys, and now it's the fans. Now it's your turn to vote. You got to hear both these guys defend their argument. So who won this version of Ben versus? Was it Ben, as he said it was Corey Raymond, or was it Grant Chachere who said it was Bo Davis? Before we get off the air, Grant, one more time, promote Red River Sports Media and where they can follow your content.
Yeah, so you'll be able to follow Ruger Sports Media on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Eventually, we'll have TikTok right now, but it might be banned, so who knows? But anyway, you can also make sure to subscribe to Ruger Sports Media on YouTube, where you'll find highlights from 7-on-7 tournaments and LSU practices, press conferences. But then also, I have my 2 podcasts. One's the Set It Off podcast, where I talk about sports all across Louisiana, whether college or professional. And then also, I have the Recruiting Board podcast, where I interview different recruits around the country. Most of them have actually been from Louisiana and Texas, but I've also had Florida and Georgia as well. And I also will have a guy from California being interviewed very soon as well. But then also, I will also have a podcast covering high school football pretty soon. Don't know when, but it'll be sometime in the next few months.
All right, so there you have it. So now is your chance to vote. You can find the link in the description of the video. So who do you think won the argument between Ben and Grant? It's your turn to vote and cast your decision on who won this episode of Ben Versus.